Okay.
Ooh, we coordinated today.
Oh, yes. Look at us in our foresty, earthy tones. Okay. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Maybe 10 seconds. We got our clock. I got my guest. I look very short next to you. And go! Welcome back to For Time with Myriad. I am one of the regular hosts, Anna, and I'm here with Marta today. And we're going to talk a little bit about how to incorporate yoga into a fitness routine if you are someone who does a lot of boot camp or CrossFit classes, or you're a weightlifter, or if you're someone who's listening to this podcast regularly and you're not a Myriad member, how you might incorporate yoga into your life if you are just a regular exerciser. So let's dive in. What are kind of the biggest considerations that you encourage people to think about, like why incorporate yoga into your routine?
Great question. So there's a lot of reasons that people come to yoga.
Mm-hmm.
People come to yoga because they're looking for more flexibility is a big term that's thrown around a lot, or mobility. So trying to kind of loosen up the joints and move a little bit better or feel better moving in your body. People can come to yoga because they're looking for strength. It's a different type of strength than you're going to get in like your CrossFit or your boot camp workouts. But it's kind of a more intuitive strength. And then also, you know, a big one is a lot of people come to yoga because they are stressed, they're anxious, and they're looking for like a timeout, a way to get out of your head.
A timeout.
A little bit.
Love it.
And like in a different way than boot camp or CrossFit
Yes.
or more intense exercise. It's a little calmer way to get into that state.
Totally. So for the folks who are regulars in our community, what would you recommend to someone looking to add some yoga into their weekly routine?
Yeah. So the first thing is to kind of consider what your goals are. So I think what we hear a lot from people specifically in Myriad is they're looking for the stretch component because they're feeling tight, they're feeling sore after they've done a bunch of snatches or something, or deadlifts, and they want to move their body, but they cannot come back to CrossFit that day. So I think people forget that yoga is it's not all super chill. It can be, but you can move your body. We're not getting our heart rate up in yoga. We're really focusing on the breath, but we can still build some strength with ease and move at a more moderate pace. So considering your goals, if you are interested in what I like to call an active rest day, so you're like, hey, I've just done CrossFit the last 3 days, I'm really tight, I'm really sore, but I still need to move my body, checking out classes like Align or Flow, those are gonna get your body moving a little bit better, and then just sub those in for your CrossFit or your boot camp classes. They usually line up so that if you normally would come to like a 5 o'clock CrossFit class, we've got a 5:15 yoga class at that time.
Similar time frame, yeah.
Yeah. The other thing to think of is if you are like really tight and really sore and you're like, actually standing in a lunge sounds terrible, choose your class wisely as well. We name them different things for different reasons.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to be standing up and you actually just want to be stretching, go to a stretch class. It's literally what it's named. This class is just going to allow you to hold stretch postures for 2 to 3 minutes at a time, and it's going to get you to turn your relaxation response on in your body, which is something we do not do in weightlifting.
Yeah, definitely not a parasympathetic moment.
No.
So that kind of brings me to something that I've heard from folks. I would say that often we find people who are really into CrossFit and like get into this community can be like pretty high achieving type A kind of folks. And I've heard from some people when I encourage them to do yoga, like, oh, I couldn't ever. It's like very hard for me to turn my brain off. Like the shavasana at the end, that rest posture is really hard. What's your advice to those people?
I actually think that is the hardest part about yoga for a lot of people, is the capacity, the ability to turn your brain off. If it's helpful for you, think about that as like a goal or a barrier to cross. Like you can get the achievement in being able to turn your mind off, right?
Yeah.
Like that is really hard to do. So if you make it your goal to like, I want to be able to just turn my brain off for 10 seconds, and then you increase that, with time it does get easier, but it's hard, it's a practice. So you can think of it as the same way as like, I have a goal to snatch a certain amount of weight over my head. I have a goal to be able to sit in silence for 1 minute.
Oh my gosh. I don't think I've ever heard anyone, I feel like my advice is usually like, well, that feels like you really need it if you can't. But that's a good way of like taking a type A person and using their personality to their advantage of like, well, make it a goal to do that. I love that idea. What about people who feel like from a timing perspective, yoga is hard? Like I often hear people say like, I can only work out this many days a week. What's your advice to people in that regard?
Yeah. So if you're a person who knows that you can only commit 3 days a week to working out and you just don't have time to come in more frequently than that, there's a couple of ways you can approach that. If you have the space in your day, you can double up 2 classes, one behind the other. If you do CrossFit in the morning at 7 in the morning, for example, we've got a 6 a.m. yoga class on Mondays and Wednesdays. So that can be a really great warm up too if you're a little tight in the morning. Same thing with boot camp. We do a class at 7 a.m. on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So that can be a great warm up before your 8 a.m. boot camp. Just get it all done at one time. And they're 45-minute classes, which is really awesome. But also yoga is so great because it is something you can practice at home. I mean, obviously, we love for you to be in the studio. I think the community experience is really powerful and provides a lot of support if you have a hard time sitting in silence. But it's something you can just practice at home too, like talking to any one of the yoga teachers, gathering 1 or 2 poses. You can usually fit in about 10 or 15 minutes in the morning or in the evening before bed, and just a good way to start to get used to incorporating that in.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think we forget that that is something you don't have to be in the studio for necessarily. It's definitely, I think, a better experience, but if you're someone who is limited on time, I think that's a great way to like start small, and hopefully I think it's one of those things where the more you do it, the more you're like, oh, I do need this. I make it a priority, and it becomes easier to find the time. All of a sudden it opens up in your schedule.
Yes.
You know?
And then you're like, maybe I have 1 day a week where I could go to a yoga class.
Yes.
I think too, not to like underestimate the benefit of just 1 class per week can be really huge and profound.
Yeah.
So you don't have to do it every single day. Like it's okay.
Yes, you can start with 1 a week, and maybe that's plenty for you, and that's the journey. With that, do you think it's generally beneficial for people to go to the same class every week or play around? What are your thoughts on that?
I think that also is a little bit dependent on your personality and what your goals are. So if you're a person who's a high stress person and you are not one who allows space for yourself to just kind of exist on your own, it might be nice to attend like a restorative class every week, for example. Restorative yoga is a really quiet class. It's really relaxing, and the point is to be held in these poses for a long time with a lot of props. You should be relatively comfortable, and it's just providing a space for you to relax.
Yeah.
So it's like 60 minutes of your time that you are setting aside to relax. If you are a high stress person, I highly recommend doing that for yourself once a week or once every 2 weeks. But if you're a person who needs a little bit of variety because you get bored with things, mix it up. And yoga is all about our intuition as well, which I think is hard for people, but it's all about getting in touch with what your body needs that day.
Yeah.
So it can be really good to mix it up. If you're like, I'm just tired, I want to go to a stretch class today.
Totally.
Listen to your body.
I think that's such a great point, because I think a lot of people come to group fitness classes because they like being told what to do. They like following instruction. And I think sometimes people are so used to that in the fitness space that when they go to yoga, they don't necessarily realize that they can, skip a posture or, take a break or do something different. I think it's important to remind people that they have that permission to do something different.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because one thing that I like to point about yoga is that it actually is a very autonomous and like empowering practice in a lot of ways. If you're used to being told to like how to do everything all the time, giving yourself the opportunity to be like, I don't want to do it that way is really, really powerful. And you get really familiar with your own body and more fine-tuned. So actually, I find that when I'm doing,
we can keep going.
I find that when I'm doing like weightlifting stuff, when a coach gives me a cue, I can understand it a little bit better because I'm very familiar with how my body moves.
Yeah, that's so true. I think that's another important point is yoga can not only in the realm of like giving you that recovery mobility piece, but it can help you be more in tune with your body, which can also help you in the fitness space. So the practices work well together.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for chatting today.
You're welcome. I could talk about it forever.
Yeah. We'll do another one sometime. All right, 3, 2, 1, time.
Yay.